someone will go and eat their pepper and you will be sweating for them. Is that right?
You know, they tell the young ones that Baba, you go grow. Your time will come.
White beard or grey beard.
Your time will come.
Yesterday we had a holiday.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense to me. I didn't see any ceremony. Maybe there was one. I didn't see. Apart from the one that saw in Justice Eniebua, which is not something that happens every year. What was the essence of yesterday's holiday?
Yesterday's holiday, and good evening to your listeners, is the second of the Constitution Day holidays. It's a day set aside to give us an opportunity to reflect over the constitutional dispensation in which we are. And for those who may not be familiar with our history, we have been trying or experimenting a few times in our history to have a constitutional governance arrangement. We failed 3 times. It was characterized by coups, lots of human rights infractions, etc. We are in the 4th Republic. This is the 4th time we have tried, I think about 27 years of undisrupted constitutional rule. And the administration believes that, as was thought of in the First Republic, the day that commences the beginning of this constitutional period should be set aside as a holiday to introspect, to recommit ourselves to the Constitution, particularly also to focus on what parts of our constitutional governance needs to be attended to moving forward. Yesterday, unlike the previous year, what we decided to do was not to have any other special event except for the swearing in and the induction to office of the new Chief Justice, and the President to use that as an opportunity to make the necessary remarks to draw attention to the issues that we want to draw attention to on Constitution Day.
But how do people reflect on a day when you just allow them to go to the beach and chill, go and chew chicken or whatever they have to go and chew? Do you not have a program to guide people, perhaps something related to the day? Otherwise, it just becomes an ordinary day where we're supposed to celebrate.
I think you will recall that prior to the day, some of the key agencies of state responsible for promoting our constitution, like the NCCE and central government itself, put out through various media channels, including yours, notices calling on all of us on how to observe the day. What happened on the day was the President taking advantage of it to, as I mentioned earlier, swearing the Chief Justice and also speak to some of the key outstanding things that we need to focus our attention on in our democratic dispensation.
The day also marked the 3rd anniversary of your boss being president of this country. He gave himself 72% when he met journalists at the end of the year last year in terms of assessing his own government. What are the elements of this 72% that he chalked himself?
So you're tempting me to speak to something that we'll be doing on the 27th of January, which is to outline in detail, first of all, what in our manifesto we have achieved and are continuing to work on, which is what constitutes the 72% that we speak about, because what we do is that we have a government tracking system that allows us to know which of our manifesto commitments we have fulfilled or we are fulfilling. And then beyond that, we also have what we call the Manifesto Plus, which deals with things that we did not even promise, but are things that have been occasioned because of the exigencies of the moment that we've had to deal with. And I think on the 27th of January, we'll have an opportunity to go into detail on that one and put out the whole database and invite you, our colleagues in the media, civil society groups, and everybody to validate and help us have a conversation around. And this is why we argue that we are performing better in many of these areas, and that our candidates, and here I speak also from a political leaning, our candidates, Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, if given 4 more years, he will be able to do a lot more than he has done already. But broadly speaking, we started off with a weak economy. We started off, I think what many people, very descriptive, what many people will recall, was a period in which you couldn't even rely on electricity throughout. That was the Doomsday era. Very high levels of unemployment, high cost of living if you benchmarked with inflation, etc. At that time, we had actually gone for a bailout from the International Monetary Fund. We started off from a time when you had a weak security front in the face of growing terrorism and other domestic threats. Over the last 3 years, and I'm happy you said 3 years because the president has just been in office for 3 years now. Over the last 3 years, we have done a lot to reverse that. If you talk of the economy itself and the macroeconomic foundation that needed to be turned around, if you talk of the energy situation, if you talk of the unemployment situation, and there I'll be categorical. We have not said that everybody has got a job. No, we'll be untruthful if we say that. But it is palpably clear that we have created several initiatives that have taken hundreds of thousands of people out of the unemployment bracket into a bracket where they have a daily activity to engage in and get remuneration at the end of that. You would recall also that we have successfully exited the fund program, and most importantly, exited the space where you had all of these international dictates on you on what you could or could not do, even if you claimed that you were an independent country. You recall we came into power at the time when we had major financial sector challenges. We had signaled earlier that about 7 banks were going to go under, and over the last 3 years, what we've done is to do a resolution that has ensured that initially those in the banking sector had all their deposits underwritten, those in the non-banking sector had parts of their deposits underwritten, and last year, just before we ended the year, you heard the president clearly announce that the totality of that, having improved the macro situation, can now be underwritten by the state. So broadly.
So you've done that, and the consequence is that people have lost their monies. They still are not sure where they're going to get their monies. I have a message from someone in Asimfoso who said he wants to get married. His money is locked up in one of these institutions that you have cleaned up, and as we speak, he's still uncertain as to how it's going to be.
Well, the president has given certainty that all
also
of that
people have lost their jobs. So
I'll come to that.
You may have done good things, but
let's start off with people's deposits. The president has been quite clear in his Christmas message, underwriting all of those deposits, that anybody whose funds were in any of these regulated and licensed institutions has now got the clarity that their funds have been underwritten and therefore will be paid up, while the receiver goes through the process of mopping up the money from wherever it is. Now, when you talk of jobs, for example, again, go back. And throughout this year, Sanda, I would encourage you that there's no conversation that we can have by pretending the past didn't happen. We cannot. If we do not recall our history, we cannot see clearly where we are going. You recall we started from a time where you had financial institutions that had literally run dry, were surviving on emergency liquidity assistance from the central bank. What it meant was that those companies had gone bust. Those about 10,000 jobs or so had actually gone underwater. You have an administration that comes in and says that we're going to resolve the situation. It's taken some time. We've had to find about 15 billion, which we hadn't budgeted for. 15 billion cedis, which Nana Akufo-Addo could have used to do several other things, to underwrite that. What that has done is that it has saved about 7,000 jobs. So you can look at it from one side and say 3,000 jobs were lost. Somebody would ask you, but how about the initial 10,000 jobs that actually gone underwater?
Okay.
What he has done did not succeed in saving all 10,000 jobs thereabout, about 7,000 saved, but you would have lost about 3,000. I think that if you put that before anybody and you explain the situation to them quite clearly, they would understand that the exercise that the administration has gone through has been one that has helped to mitigate the situation.
But you're a government. It's your job to find solutions to problems. When you attempted to save ECG in that botched deal, you ensured that every worker of ECG remained employed, even though the company was taken over by a private company. Why didn't you have a similar structure?
ECG was a state-owned entity.
Well, but now the state owned these banks and these financial institutions.
Well, no, not all of them. Some of them, for example,
CBG is
went
owned by
through
the state.
a purchase and assumption transaction. You cannot force the private organization that is going through this purchase and assumption transaction to take on all of that. But ECG, as you mentioned earlier, was a state-owned enterprise. We were going through a process where we had an ECG turnaround program, started in the previous administration, came to our administration. We amended parts of the structure, and key among that, ensure that nobody was going to lose a job. And as the facts will show, as we went along the deal and grew uncomfortable with some parts of it, the government did not renege on its obligations, took a bold decision to halt the processes, to investigate, and when it was convinced that it could not even agree with our American friends, and you know how the Americans are, but when we could not agree with them, we agreed to disagree and parted ways, and yet continue to work with them on other cooperation items. So the two are different.
You touched on employment. When I advertised that you were going to be on the show, I received several messages with a hashtag post nurses now, and it has to do with a 2017 batch of nurses who have still not been posted. What is the state of affairs in that area?
Well, so two things. First, I'd have to get you the specific on that one. But generally, the first question you ask is, prior to 2017, what was the situation of backlogged nurses who were completing public institutions and private institutions and were not getting posted? You'll recall that that is the time when the previous administration, having told us that the meat was down to the bone, and B, sent us into an IMF bailout program, told us that they could not do recruitment in the public sector generally, and therefore they had to freeze. So let me give you a hypothetical. If they froze the recruitment of, say, 50,000 nurses who are graduating, and the new administration comes in, gets us out of that deal, improves the financial situation, and says that out of that 50,000, we're able to recruit 40,000 of those nurses out of the bracket, you will still find that some 10,000 remain. 10,000, when they say we haven't been recruited yet, is a very loud voice, and our hearts go out to them. We wish that by now we would have been able to clear all of that, outstanding numbers. But look at where we've come from, and look at how much we've done during that period. As we continue to improve the financial situation, and mind you, these days we don't do this thing where you recruit people before you go and look for financial clearance for them. Now what you do is that you get financial clearance so that you're sure that by the time you recruit them, you can actually pay. Our expectation is that as we continue to improve the financial situation and get clearances for these persons, we can recruit as many as the system can accommodate. At the same time, as you improve the broader economic situation so that even private institutions can A, work, B, be sure that health insurance will pay. Because not only were they not recruiting for the public sector, health insurance had also literally collapsed to the extent that if you were a private institution and you picked a nurse, you could not be sure that health insurance will service the claims of a client who came to your hospital. So what we've done is a two-pronged approach. One, you have cleared a good chunk of the backlog. My understanding is that they are now even recruiting some of the private students. But I'll check the specific detail on this 2017. And then secondly, by improving health insurance, even for those who are not finding space here, if they find space in the private sector, you can be sure that they would also
so it's good that you've done all the analysis, but government is a continuum. Now, whether or not the Mahama administration messed up by going to IMF and all the freezing and so on, that is why you were brought in. So for these people, you've been here for 3 years. They voted for you. In fact, nurses were crucial in the campaign. They wanted Nana to come. Now they say Nana has disappointed them because the simple fact remains that you have not employed them and you have not, given them the jobs even though they've gone to school.
That's a very narrow view of it.
Is it now?
If you talk of nurses, we have done a lot for nurses, for example. I am not sure that those nurses those who were in nursing training college, who were surviving on that allowance to further their education. I have lots of friends who are nurses. I have nurses in my constituency. I have lots of colleagues who are nurses who tell you that, listen, if you got into a nursing training college, that allowance is what was going to sustain you to survive and to be able to complete and then get posted. Even if you didn't get posted, hopefully if health insurance was working properly and a private person posted you, that was the time when, let's say, bonding was being suspended. Now, if we come to power and we say that we have restored those allowances, I'm not sure any of those nurses is going to tell you that we have disappointed them.
But if they finish school in 2017,
that's a first
the logical step is to get employed after school.
But you'd have to clear the backlog first.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. They don't care about a backlog. They want to be given a job.
It matters.
That's why they wore their uniforms and joined you on your campaign trail.
You will clear the backlog. You would restore the allowances. You would continuously improve the financial situation so that those who may have not been recruited can be recruited. You would improve the private sector window through health insurance so that those who are going to get an opportunity to go into private institutions can also be accommodated. Okay. So either way, you win by the approach that we are going
The figures have come through from the production team. The allied health nurses who have not been posted, who need clearance, 541. The nurses with diploma are 14,000. And the certificate nurses are over 11,000. If you put this together, we have over 20,000 people who have finished school, want to be posted, and you still have not posted them. And your simple explanation is that John Mahama took us to IMF.
No, that's not my explanation.
We've been tied up to
I've told you
agreements
that so far,
and you are clearing a backlog.
By the end of 2019, we had recruited over 50,000 into the health sector, a good chunk of them being nurses.
Okay.
You are telling me that about 29,000 or 20?
No, this will be 26,000.
26,000 have not been. Look at the number that has been pulled in. If all of these numbers had been pulled in earlier, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But even as we started, over 50,000 health workers have been recruited, a good chunk of them being nurses. Our expectation is that as we continuously improve the financial situation, as we continue to get those clearances in, we will be able to take off this final chunk that has not been recruited yet. Our hearts go out to them.
It's 30 minutes to 1900 GMT. This is Point Blank on Eyewitness News. My name is Umaru Sanda Amadu, and my guest tonight is the Minister for Information. 2019 in review, he's giving an outline of how they have fared so far in defense of the president's position that they've chalked 72%. Now, this is despite the fact that Imani says you've chalked below 50%, but he says it's going to be on 27 January?
Yeah, 27th of January.
We will be coming there to see your own marking scheme and your
we'll
own...
be looking forward to receiving
your own questions being marked by your own
We'll be looking
self.
forward to receiving
What do you think you did wrong in the past 3 years, or at least in 2019?
I don't think any government achieves perfection in its work. But in the last 3 years, and in 2019 specifically, what we did was to consolidate the early successes that we had started. There obviously will be things that may not go in accordance with plan. But I think the most important picture is the big picture, is what we achieve at the end of the day. In 2019 specifically, many people forget that around this time in 2019, we were celebrating for the first time the re-enskinment of Ayana. That was a conflict that took away hundreds of millions of Ghana cedis, took away lots of lives, cut out economic activity, broke families apart, and through the work and instrumentality of President Akufo Addo and this administration, we were able to turn back the hands of time. And by this time last year, around this time last year, we're getting ready, if not exactly on the date, we were getting ready to re-enskin Ayana. Last year, for example, is a year in which you had, for the first time in the history of our country, from north to south, 1.2 million families directly benefiting from the national cake. 1.2 million families.
Through which policy?
Through the free senior high school program.
The free senior high school policy that you still have not been able to pay funds to secondary schools. Indeed, as we speak, the headmasters are running from proceeds or remnants of the last proceeds you give them.
When it comes
for a huge policy
public,
like that,
when it comes to public financial management, there are always instances in which someone says, I have a balance that is not being paid, let's reconcile, let's pay. Those ones for me are not the big issues. The big issues are, what is the impact in the lives of people? 1.2 million households. Think about it for a moment. I come from a village constituency. I know people who, when their children qualify for senior high school, they have to literally mortgage the entire family's cocoa farm. Maybe if you're living in Accra and you don't have these difficulties, you may not recognize it. But 1.2 million households across the country have now been taken out of that. Last year, for example, as I mentioned, about 50,000 people recruited in the health sector alone. Last year was the first time that a barter deal to receive roads in exchange for bauxite proceeds began to see the light of day. You recall that
we
last year...
We still don't have the roads.
Oh, you have to get on the roads. The roads for which sword has been cut. You have to get on it.
So how much bauxite have we sent?
We haven't sent 1 ton of bauxite.
So how are we getting benefits for that?
But I'm sure you've read the master facility agreement. It's quite clear that the Republic of Ghana is given a concession to the Chinese company Sino-Hydro to build $2 billion worth of infrastructure. And in return, we are developing our own bauxite. And quite recently, Mr. Michael Ansa and the team from GIADEC outlined where they are in the development process. We are developing. We are not giving the bauxite to them. We are developing our own bauxite resources.
And exporting.
And we are exporting as a repayment. That was last year. That was when the deal began to see the light of day, regardless of the impediments that had been put in its way in the years.
My question was whether there's anything you did wrong.
And I'm saying that I look at the positive side. Because the big picture, in my view, is the most important picture.
Let me tell you a few of the negatives and tell me if you can defend them. Contracts for sale. Your man who is supposed to be in charge of, protecting the purse by regulating the procurement process was found. And of course, the court has not concluded yet, but was found on tape to have been engaged in the same act that was supposed to prevent.
I understand that he's been currently investigated by the Office of the Special Prosecutor.
Yes, he's been investigated.
What the executive arm of government can do is to remove him from post, which is what has happened. And the independent Special Prosecutor is the one who's looking into that matter. But last year also was the year in which we were able to provide a full list of about 58 1D1F factories that we were comfortable to say that these are the factories that are out there under our program. We haven't said all 275 have been completed, but this is where we are in that program.
You called John Mahama and his government corrupt when you were campaigning. 3 years on, can you truly say to us that you and your government have not been corrupt in any way?
I have not been corrupt. If anybody has the view that this administration or any particular element in this administration has been corrupt, even if you do not believe the administration to self-investigate, the answer doesn't lie in waking up every morning and throwing up an allegation that until you prove yourself innocent, then you are guilty. No. There are independent constitutional bodies in this country that, apart from the government, can investigate and pronounce on whether or not these suspicions are true. I was in this country, I was a journalist, when somebody was of the view that a minister of state had abused his office and proceeded to Shraj to make a report. I recall the President Kufuor at the time asking the minister to step aside, and Shraj conducting a detailed investigation and agreeing with the applicant. So my view is this: if you want to talk about corruption, there are independent bodies. Or if you don't believe any government official, don't worry, that's your right. But there are independent bodies. We will do ourselves a lot more good by reporting, adducing the evidence so that they can investigate and settle some of these matters. Because suggesting that I hear journalists are corrupt, Sanda, you must be corrupt, prove to me you are not corrupt, is probably not the best way to go.
97.3 CTF. I mean, concluding and in fighting corruption, information flow is crucial. You said to us that by 2020, you're going to roll out or you're going to have us be able to access information, which is the right to information.
That is so. That is so.
It's January 8th.
Yeah.
The structures have not been put in place.
Says who?
Says you and I.
No, I haven't said that. You are suggesting.
Okay, you need to have a governing board for a commission that is supposed to super or be like the appeal commission of a sort of the RTA. Have you set it up?
No, that board is not in place. But that board is not a prerequisite to you applying for information.
How?
So let me explain. And I want to request of all our colleagues to pick up the act and read the procedures. They're quite clear. Okay. The first thing you do is that you apply for information from the information officer in the public institution. Today, if you go to the ministries, there are information officers who've been designated.
Since when?
They have been designated. You should send a reporter. Come and check.
Ministries?
Yes.
Every ministry has an information
officer. You should send a reporter. There's an information officer who's been designated. There are forms, standard forms that have been made available to assist you in your application. And even those forms have columns where they will be able to feed back to you when and where you can come back for feedback.
At ministries?
It's at the ministries.
Departments?
You should go. No, we haven't completed the rollout from departments and agencies yet. But at the ministries, you would get that exercise happening currently.
What about district assemblies?
No, that is part of the entire process.
So how do you say to us that RTI has been rolled out or is ready to operate? If I were in Ofuasi Ayerbi, I don't know if it's a district, and I needed information from the district.
You are not stopped from applying. You will apply.
But who am I going to apply to? You've not recruited an information officer for the district.
So who am I going to? The law does not say we should recruit an information officer for the district. That's why I use the word designated. The law does not say we should recruit an information officer. We're supposed to have persons either recruited or designated.
From the office, an existing officer or a new officer.
So where we are not recruiting, we have designated. So here's what's going to happen. You apply to the information officer in the institution. There are two types of application. They have, I think, the Section 23 application, which is an application that borders on liberty and life matters, which application they have to respond to within 48 hours. And then there are the general applications, which take about 14 days. So what you do is that you make that application. A designated officer will receive and respond to your application. Yeah, but there's no
designated officer, and that's my point.
I'm explaining to you that if you apply today, there will be somebody to receive your application. Your application will be responded to. We are going through a process, a civil service process. We're going through a civil service process of doing those, particularly the recruitments at the ministry level. At the lower levels, you're going to have people designated because in Ghana, we have over 600 public institutions. We are not recruiting 600 information officers. Those that we recruited were just about 80 or so.
Your district, who has been designated in your district?
I'll have to check that name for you. I don't have the database of all of these persons.
But you see, that's the point. So if you have not recruited for districts, at least you should designate. And if over the past few months you said to us that you're not going to roll out the RTI after it became law because you needed time to put structures in place, and as we speak, it's 7 days into the program.
It is
or
available
8 days into
today.
the program.
Don't
you still do not have.
No.
You do not have designated people, and you do not have recruited people.
No. Listen,
that's a fact.
Listen. The right to information is in Article 21(1)(f) of the Constitution. In fact, you don't even need information officers before you access that right or before you make that application. What the law has done is only to provide a procedure that makes it easier for you to apply. So here's what you do. You can apply today. A designated officer where one has not been recruited will attend to your application within 14 days. Now, on the specific matter of the board, as I mentioned, the board is not a prerequisite to you applying for information. You can apply now. If, for example, you are displeased with the response that you get within that 14-day period, the law says that your next level of resort
is the head of the
institution.
And if that fails?
If, again, you are displeased with that, and then you can apply to the RTI Commission. We have completed the processes for the rollout of the commission itself. We're just awaiting the date of that formal inauguration. Our expectation is that by the time anybody is even ready to file an application, the commission will be in place.
Your colleague MP sends a message, and that's going to be my last statement.
Who is this?
He's for Boku Central. He says, can you defend the president's expenditure on travel alone? 68 million in 9 months of 2019, 1.5 million on refreshments.
The president travels across the country and brings back home a lot of dividends.
Really?
I'm surprised when I hear people pretend that the president...
But it's foreign travel.
But I'm saying that the president, travels across the world and brings back a lot of dividends. And I'm saying that I'm surprised when anybody suggests that all that he has seen is the cost, but does not want to look at the benefits. Do you recall that, for example, when the president traveled to, I think, Germany with the minister responsible for finance, Ghana had an opportunity to be put in the compact, which gives us a lot of money to roll out a number of interventions and support general budget support, for example. The president has traveled to jurisdictions like China. I traveled with him on the Chinese trip. Take that Chinese trip, for example, and if you are getting $2 billion worth of infrastructure from that single Chinese trip, I'm surprised when anybody says, I want to just...
68 million.
I'm coming. I'm surprised when anybody says, I just want to look at the cost, but I don't want to look at the benefits that come on the other side of it. So you've got to look at all of these matters in context and the kind of benefits that the president brings home when he travels abroad.
Information Minister Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, thank you for being my guest on Premier.
Happy New Year, Sanda.
Happy 2020.